execs and Ian.
I've sent away the rustler. We share an office, and he came in and was unpacking his biscuits right next to the microphone, so I muted myself.
Right, I've just sent away the dog, so.
Yeah, my two are next door, so I'm hoping they'll be well behaved, but who knows?
Hi everyone. Morning everyone.
Morning.
Ada, Luke, so Nikki and John. I'm going to start at 11 because I realise the pressures that everybody is under.
Just on that, I've asked Matt to keep the patient piece down to a maximum of 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And unless anybody has, just to warn people, unless anybody has any great objection, I will go straight into the patient story so that we can release people as soon as possible. Okay, so John's joined us. Alison. Okay, I'm going to make a start. It's 11 o'clock. Let's crack on. So there are a number of apologies. I'm not going to go through them. We'll note them, but clearly executive attendance is somewhat limited due to the exceptional circumstances currently prevailing. I'll take it that there are no declarations of interest from people. I am going to welcome Alison Davis, who is the chair designate, and subject to ratification by the governors next Tuesday, which I'm not envisaging being any problem whatsoever, will take over as chair on the 1st of February. So Alison, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Simon. Delighted to see everybody.
Well, you'll get to know a few names as we go through. So as I said, let's start with the patient story. I know Nikki couldn't be with us this morning because she's very tied up, but Matt, thanks very much indeed for attending to introduce this, and we're joined by Oliver and Caroline. Welcome, who will take us through it. So Matt, Oliver, Caroline, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. So hello, my name is Matthew Salim. I'm Associate Chief Nurse here. I'd like to introduce the two people presenting to you this morning. So you've got Professor Oliver Pearce and Sister Caroline Middleton. It is a two-part show, so Professor Oliver Pearce will take you through the app. It is a My Mobility Pathway app. He'll take you through the workings and the setting up, and then we'll relate it to the actual patients, and Sister Caroline Middleton will take you through some of the patient stories. So without any more ado and technology bearing, we will hand it over to Professor Oliver Pearce. Thank you.
Hello, and with your permission, I'm just going to share my screen. And if I can check with anyone whose microphone is on, can you see what we've got on the screen? My screen, that is?
Yes, I can, yep.
Lovely, right, and then I'll dive straight in. We've got 10 minutes, 5 for me, 5 for Caroline. So it's going to be a whistle-stop tour with no apologies. So I wanted to present the value of My Mobility as a digital pathway app that we've taken on for hip and knee replacement patients here at Milton Keynes. Brief introduction. I'm the UK lead for rapid recovery programs for Zimmer Biomet, and I sit on their European Advisory Board. I seem to have written that twice for those quick readers. I hold visiting professor posts in computing science, material science, health sciences, and senior lecturer posts in musculoskeletal sciences and sports and exercise medicine in local universities. I'm the vice chair of research here. And I wanted to put some bland quotes up. Digital is the new paper. Home is the new office. People are accepting and adopting literally phased transitions in upscaling technology much faster since COVID, out of necessity. And apps are starting to replace hospital paper resource in a similar way. Milton Keynes is way ahead of the curve in digital transformation, and that's a top-down thing, and I'm very grateful to the people at the top for that. We've benefited from it. Examples here are eCare, Insignia, remote access for clinicians, Big Hand, and an IT department who seem willing as well as able to accept the challenge of change. So out with the old. We used to have paper patient information booklets, and ours was a pretty good one, and it was used as an example around the UK and in some European countries. My Mobility is an app that was originally designed in the States in collaboration with Apple with great fanfare, because they released cheap Apple watches to go with it for American customers who could buy it back after 3 months for $200. That's not an option in the UK, and it doesn't make sense for NHS. But anyone who has a digital watch, it can link to the app in useful and interesting ways. The app, set out as a clinical trial originally, 2018, USA based, included a timeline, prehab and rehab, so exercises before as well as after surgery, video content for the patients, reminders that came up on their home screen of important things that the designers, which is the operating teams, thought were important, and a feedback dashboard. This is an example along the top of the timeline. They get given the app numerous days before surgery, and in the UK, many, many more numerous days before surgery, especially during COVID times. And they have reminders, things that they can touch, all the educational content, videos of what exercises to do and patients and how people respond to things, all the way in the run up to surgery, what to expect during their inpatient stay, and for a number of days out to a year afterwards, actually, where we can collect proms. Very useful. Milton Keynes was the first outside of the USA to be offered and to adopt My Mobility. The American model didn't fit at all well, so we had to do a complete redesign with our very good team here, which means that any new sites in the UK, Europe and the EMEA, when they adopt this app, will now have the Milton Keynes branded model as the way it's already set up, and they won't have to do too much work. So free advertising if we ever needed it. The Apple Watch is optional. In the US trial, it was offered at a discount price. In the UK, the NHS model won't support the cost, but you do get step counts from their smartphones when they carry them. So you still have some of the functionality, dialing data into what we get back from the app. Prehab and rehab, patients are set tasks and exercises, and they have to tap the screen when they've done them, and we get a record of how often they've done them as a sort of a percentage, and it flags if they are low, so we have remote monitoring and dashboards. Pre-op quads exercises, push notifications, post-op exercises, different ones that increase for after surgery week 1, after surgery week 2, as they track their progress. We get a dashboard, and this is an example of not real patients, so I'm not giving away patient data here, these are fake, but this is an example of a dashboard with little color coded symbols to represent when things are flagging as abnormal, red being bad, yellow being medium, green being good. So you can see pre-op, if people are running into trouble, contact them and bring their surgery forwards if necessary. Post-op, you can see if people are doing well, or again, it can flag them if they're in trouble, and a phone call from one of the care team can identify if there's a reason for them being in trouble and intervene early, which in all of medicine, catching something early makes treating it early easier, better, and if we are financially minded, cheaper. So we get greater detail on each patient. You can click on their icon, example, Mr. Fictitious Cooper here. You can see that before surgery, he was doing his exercises a frequent amount of time. He'd read all of his educational content, scoring 100%. And prior to surgery, he had low step counts, but then not forgetting he had severe arthritis. So you would expect you won't get 10,000 steps out of someone who's bad enough to need a knee replacement. Proms, there are proms already embedded in the app, scores that we can generate. So the patient gets a link, they follow the link, they answer the questions, and the results are stored in a secure database, which we can inquire. So we don't need pen and paper anymore. And we have automatically collated data, which for me, who's interested in data and research, is great. But if it's just for audit, for example, and monitoring your practice, also very good. Another world first, Oxford have designed, they already have the Oxford hip and the Oxford knee scores, which are validated and famous scores, but they've now designed OARS and OACs, which are change scores for early change. So how patients experience their inpatient hospital stay and the first couple of weeks after surgery. There are no other scores that do that, and we've been offered the very first use worldwide of these new scores within the app. So it will permit benchmarking of the patient experience in the early phase, which is important. This is the number of patients we've already enrolled on the app in the 3 months since we started it. We now have 151. Setting it up is very difficult. You need a team. We have a great team of people on the Rapid Recovery Programme at MK, consisting of physios, secretaries, ward sisters, Zimmer biomet, my mobility experts, pre-assessment team, pain sister, occupational therapist, and anaesthetist, and you can't do it on your own. There's more work as a result. We're getting more data, and what do we do with the data? So you need someone to screen any messages from the in-app messaging from patients. You need to have someone who answers them or forwards them on daily. You need someone to register the patients for the app for GDPR compliance. And you need someone to keep tabs on the dashboard to see if anyone's flagging as in trouble. There are some new sophisticated gait metrics where we get speed, stair climbing, step length, gait asymmetry. To summarize, if I may, so I'm getting to the 5-minute mark, it's excellent, the app, for patient education, excellent for time-based alerts prior to surgery as well as after surgery, excellent for encouraging prehab and rehab, so better outcomes, excellent for real-time monitoring of patients remotely, never more important than during COVID times. We can keep an eye on them without having to bring them to hospital. And it's excellent for a searchable database of patient outcomes, but there is, it should be said, some work involved in setting up the system. More data, more work. All these changes, prior to that, so we had a different app. All these changes have been made within what we call existing resource. We're not spending money, we're just all doing stuff in our spare time. It's been, setting this up has been a story of cooperation, teamwork, and taking on additional work. Just to, what's the word, blow our own trumpet, we've been made a few years back now the UK Centre of Reference for Rapid Recovery Programmes. And we receive visits to the department monthly, or we did pre-COVID, to demonstrate best practice, and we regularly showcase our work and results at international meetings once or twice a year. We might need a little help, advert. There does come a time when an extra pair of hands could come in very useful, and the concept of an ERAS, Enhanced Recovery After Surgery nurse, is not a new one. We have one here in general surgery in MKUH. We're looking, hopefully, to appoint an ERAS nurse into elective orthopedics who could be someone to take on some of the coordination roles we've just discussed. Also someone to help me, us, as the team, to drive further change, which, as we know, takes time and effort, but is worth it, to improve patient experience, smooth running of the already world-leading system we have in place here at MK. Now I'm going to unshare my screen quickly, because we don't want to waste your time, and hand over to Senior Sister Caroline Middleton for the patient experience. Caroline.
Right, can people see my screen?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, so this is about, thank you, Oliver, for my presentation focuses mainly on how the app is used in a variety of scenarios, and the quotes are taken from the app, but patient confidentiality has been maintained. So case one was a lady who came in, had a total hip replacement. She was discharged home.
Caroline, your slides aren't changing on the screen.
1 week later. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so sorry, went to the urgent care centre with hip pain. So she was a lady who'd gone home. The doctors didn't look at her dressing, but they diagnosed a wound infection. And simultaneously, she contacted me through the app. And because I was concerned, and we've been on the radar for wound infections, I contacted Ollie and said, is there any way we can sort of see this lady early? So helpfully, he saw her next day. She, in fact, didn't have a wound infection. So she avoided poor unnecessary treatment and unnecessary antibiotics. But on the flip side, if she had, in fact, had a wound infection, then we would have treated her really early and in the right way, and potentially saved ourselves a bit of money, but also a better experience for the patient, because a wound infection is quite terrible. So that's one happy patient. For the next slide, we get patients pre-op and post-op contacting us, and this was another person who contacted us post-op in pain, and it was a surprise because they hadn't had pain, and so I was able to get a physio to contact the patient direct and help them through that way. So they weren't sort of waiting around for people to contact them, and especially in COVID times, people aren't making contact as quickly as they should do. But yeah, that's another happy patient experience. Another one was around the cancellations that we've had and OT things. So people have been seen in pre-op assessment, but then they've been enrolled in the app, and because their operation has been cancelled, they're a bit concerned. So I was able to triage this query straight to the OT team, who then were able to inform the patient and relieve any anxiety for surgery. For the next one was a gentleman who's obviously another one. The app was never really aimed for this kind of problem, but I mean, he was enrolled on the app, and so was also concerned about whether his CT scan was going ahead. I would have liked to have answered him in a much better way by sort of assuring him that the CT was available, but due to time constraints, I just had to bat him off a little bit back to Miss Webber, and he did in fact have his CT, and he did then communicate that he was happy for his that he'd had his scan and he was happy. So as Ollie alluded to, there is a lot of extra work in monitoring, and at the time pre-COVID, it wasn't too bad. And as the numbers are increasing, as we've also said, it's increasing the workload. And I am a bit behind with trying to get in touch with patients on the app at the moment. So the future, as Ollie alluded to as well, it would be ERAS nurse for surgery would be a real good role to develop. I think we could develop the role in many ways. I think it has lots of benefits. Manage the standardization of patient care as well is really good, because then if we're all pretty much doing the same thing, that is a better experience for the patient and for staff who know then what they're doing, and the ERAS nurse can be the coordinator of trying to standardize these things and taking the enhanced recovery roles forward for orthopedics. I think we want to do ACL knee day case, and that sort of falls by the wayside for many reasons, having been through the learning how rapid recovery works. We fall at many hurdles because we're not organised enough, and so that's where a new ERAS role would come into the future. And that's me done. Thank you very much. Battled through as quickly as I could.
Two excellent presentations highlighting an excellent initiative. So thank you very much indeed for those, Oliver and Caroline. Questions from anybody?
Oh,
Helen.
Thank you both very much. It was really innovative and exciting. I just wanted to pick up on Oliver, who said that you shared this good practice in many ways. And I just wondered, because of the position we're in, how do you continue to share this good practice and innovative work? And I'm especially, Caroline, in terms of patient experience and demonstrating the benefit and the impact. It's really great, thank you. But I just wondered how you will share this, because it is, as I say, excellent, and it would be a shame that if you can't continue to share the good practice because of the situation we're in.
Yeah, so lots of ways, and Caroline and I would have different perspectives, different ways of sharing it, I suspect. So prior to COVID, every month, a UK or a foreign hospital would send a surgical team, including nurses, physios, managers, OTs, you name it, to have a full day series of lectures followed by ward and theatre visits to show exactly what best practice looks like. And we have a queue of people waiting, in a sense, because they're organised through the Zimmer Biomet company who run the rapid recovery, waiting for us to be open, to be permitted to share. It's one-to-one. So that's a sort of a slow way, but that's 12 visits a year. Twice a year, normally, we have these rapid recovery conferences where as faculty or as co-chair, I sit and give lectures on what we've achieved here, both with technology or with pain relief or with theatre efficiency systems. And those conferences are to interested parties, people who are interested in developing rapid recovery themselves. So again, mixed multidisciplinary teams come to it and are all in one room to have numerous experts from around Europe lecturing to them. We publish on this topic, so it goes into the public domain in papers as well. And so we've got a lot of other technological gizmos that we've developed with the Open University. For example, all morning I've been looking at data from 2017 on pain scores from a little pain box that we've developed. The idea being it automatically collates pain data, which we can then publish on to say how good or actually how much left we still have to do, because we don't have the perfect system yet, and in fact no one does.
And from a nursing perspective, I just basically share on the ward, and we probably have been not as good at sharing up what we do so well. We've become a bit insular with it, so to share it outwards is a challenge. Yeah.
We do have the team coming with us to these conferences. So we've numerous times had nursing staff, Carol Jellicoe, our pain specialist nurse, Meryl Newsom, our physiotherapist, as part of a team, and we've lectured on the various aspects of it, because it's not just in fact, there's virtually nothing surgical to do with it. It's to do with medically optimizing patients, and that Toyota incremental improvements, Kaizen, little 1% at every step of the journey. That is what is the system that we sell, and that's why we present as a team, in a sense.
Thank you both very much.
Luke.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Caroline and Oliver. Fantastic development, really impressive. I expect you to be all over this, but my question really is just to gain some reassurance around the risk of missed patient communications via the app and potentially then poor patient outcome. Use the example of a potential infection. So I think especially as the volume of users increases, I'm sure you're all over this, and I'm sure there's multiple fail-safes within the system, but it'd be good just to hear about that.
Yes, and so when these questions come up, I often try to explain what the normal is, followed by what the new normal is. So the normal was telephones that didn't get answered, and patients who sought advice outside of the hospital and saw a GP or an urgent care centre and got honestly mismanaged. A number of times we get someone 3 weeks down the line who's seen their GP 3 times in a row with a red, seeping, oozing wound, who's been given pathetic doses of oral antibiotics, and we then have to pick up the pieces, and it is a nightmare. Whereas now we've got an app that someone has been tasked, admittedly in their spare time, in fact a group of 3, so there's Caroline as the senior sister, but her 2 deputies as well, and they share the roles because no one's here every day, to screen the calls, if you like, the communications from the patients, and identify those that need to go to the surgeon, identify those they can answer themselves simply, or identify those that are physio or rehab questions and forward them on. I think we probably want to think of it as it's an extra layer of security, or that, you know, from the system that already exists and is already there, but was frankly imperfect in the first place. This is an additional one. If you like, it's an extra resource, as opposed to a new resource that needs additional monitoring. Yes, it needs additional monitoring, but the old ones haven't been thrown out either.
And if there's any information that I need to add to eCare from these communications from patients, we do that as well. So we can put it on eCare and doctors can pick up. But yeah.
Great. Yeah,
definitely go into the app.
Okay, I'm going to take one last question from John Lyle.
Thanks, Simon. I was just building on this data flow thing. Is the app integrated into the broader system environment that we've got? Does the data flow in there?
No, but we have a very useful intermediary who could be dragged into it again. I'm sure they'll love us, Zesty, who are already working on integrating data from our pain collecting device straight into the eCare system. It's a job of work involving translating a computer language called HL7 from numeric data from the device into eCare, and then having safeguards that you don't want to get the wrong patient's data in the wrong patient's record, and so on. The short answer is, in fact, no. There is no communication link between this app, which is only 3 months in with us, and the eCare, but I would love it. I think it would be great.
and I suppose building on that, Joe or John, are there other apps in development?
So let me come in there. So yes, and we are going to connect all of these. It's just a matter of pace and timing. So we know it's the future. We're all using consistent programming language, and it is just a question of plugging it all in. And Zesty is almost certainly, as Ollie says, the vehicle for doing so.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So, Oliver, Caroline, thank you very much indeed for that. It is a fantastic initiative, yet another one, and undoubtedly the way of the future. Thank you for your time this morning. It's a public meeting, so if you wish to stay, you are very, very welcome to do so. But I'll entirely understand if you feel there are other things that you prefer to go and do.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Okay, let me go back then to the agenda. Just to remind people, the meeting is being recorded as it is a public meeting, and will be available on our website. So next is minutes of the public meeting on the 5th of November. If anybody has any comments or amendments on those. I'm doing my screen scanning, can't see anybody, so that will be taken as approved. No matters arising, I'm glad to say, so let me do the chair report. So I've already welcomed Alison, which will be great news for the trust when she takes over. In relation to other stuff that has been going on, I believe our new Director of Finance will be starting on the 24th of February. And would just once again thank Sophia for the fantastic job that she has been doing holding the fort, as ever. Yet another excellent performance. Kwame has started, I believe, in the Trust Secretary Department, so presumably we'll be getting to know some of the non-execs in due course.
He's not, sorry Simon, this is Alison Marlowe. He starts on the 1st of February, so
yes. I was jumping the gun.
Yes, so you still got me for another 2 weeks.
And I'm very happy about that personally, Alison, so great news. BMLK IACS, been a couple of meetings of that, but as you can imagine, most of it's been dominated by COVID, and really only to say that the rest of the system is under exactly the same pressures as the hospital, and I'm sure Joe will touch on that shortly. And on that light, I think I will wind up by only reiterating and repeating the board's thanks for the outstanding effort being made by all the staff at the hospital. I dialed into the Q&A session that was run by Ian and Nikki yesterday, which again was, for me, it was a very positive session, some really interesting issues raised, but highlighting the fantastic work that's being done, but also the immense pressure that people are under at the moment, and you have the thanks of the whole board for everything that is being done. So on that note, I will hand over to Joe.
Thank you very much, Simon. So 4 things on my list for the board to update. Obviously, let's do the pandemic piece first. We reached a peak of 235 patients about 7-10 days ago. I'm using the word peak in the hope that it was the peak and we are going to reduce from there. We obviously don't know that yet. As of today, we have 198 patients with COVID in our organisation. So that's the good news. The less good news is that we have in total now had 308 patients die with COVID in the organisation, and that's over 200 in this second wave. So it gives you a sense of the magnitude of the second wave compared to the first. And we currently have 340 staff off sick. That's a combination of staff with COVID, staff isolating because they're required to, because their family has COVID, and for other reasons associated with it. And roughly speaking, that's a sort of 40-40-20 split. So I'll hand over to Ian, if I may, to give slightly more details in terms of the clinical pressures that the organisation is under, and then I'll come back to talk about vaccines and other things. So Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. So I guess for me, the sort of headline number of patients with COVID, it tells part of the story, but doesn't in any sense tell all of it. I think all of those patients pretty much have some fairly specific and challenging needs. So at the moment today, we've got 10 or 11 patients who are level 3, i.e. are on ventilators and are intubated. I say 10 or 11 because I think it was 10 at the beginning of the meeting and maybe 11 by now. And we've got roughly 20 or thereabouts patients who are on non-invasive ventilators, or what's called CPAP, so the tight-fitting masks over the face. And those patients are predominantly concentrated on Ward 15, one of our respiratory wards, and in a high dependency unit sited on what's normally our day surgery unit. So those patients are clearly struggling. They're high dependency in terms of their needs for staff input. I think probably the other side of the coin there, which we don't necessarily talk about so much, is the other patients, so the other 170 patients with COVID in the hospital. And some of those patients are dying, and clearly that is dreadful from lots of perspectives, but they're dying typically without their families. We're allowing one visit from one member of the family for patients who are thought to be dying. But generally speaking, they're dying without their families, and our staff are looking after them in that context. And that's clearly a very challenging environment for those patients, their families, other patients, and staff. And then the bulk of patients who are still in the hospital, because clearly those patients who get better quickly go home fairly quickly. But those patients, other patients with COVID who are still here, are deconditioned. They've been in hospital typically for a week or more, and because of COVID, they've been largely in bed, sometimes in a chair. Their muscle mass is suffering, and you know, it's hard to get such people going again after you've been deconditioned. That's the case normally, but we've just got much larger volumes of those patients at a time when we've got the staff shortages that Joe's already referenced. So those are the sorts of difficulties we're tackling day in, day out. And we're tackling that obviously of a background now of a year of COVID. So pretty much a year to the day since Milton Keynes heard about COVID, and we look forward to welcoming people back from Wuhan province. So everyone's pretty tired. So those are sort of the key issues. I think in terms of the rate limiting steps and the problems for us, there are potentially 4. One is general beds, the second is ITU beds, the third is staff, and a fourth is oxygen. At the moment, it's ITU beds and staff, which are the big challenge for us. General beds and right now oxygen are okay, but each of those 4 things on different days, the answer is slightly different. But those are the sorts of challenges. Very happy to take questions, but I'll stop there otherwise.
Shall I go on to the vaccines bit, and we'll come back on any specifics on the back of that, because these all sort of link in. So vaccines wise, delighted to say that we've vaccinated nearly 10,000 people since we opened up in December. A huge and fantastic effort by a whole range of people, being led by Danielle and Jill. So big thank you to them. And our performance has been noted nationally in terms of how well we've done. Just to give you a quick breakdown of those numbers, around about 3,000 of our staff here have been done. We employ 4,000 substantive staff and use 5,000 in total, including bank staff. So you can see that a high proportion of staff have been done here, which is great. We've vaccinated 4,000 of the over 80-year-olds in Milton Keynes, fantastic effort. And we've also now vaccinated circa 3,000 other health and care staff around BLMK. So if you recall, the hub was the hospital vaccination centre was opened up in December to support BLMK as a whole. I haven't got the breakdown between MK and Bedfordshire and Luton for the patient and other staff groups. But just to give you a sense of how well we've done on that. And you may also have seen then a couple of bits of media that have been very well received. So we had Channel 4 in here, looking at Ward 18 and Ward 15, 16, very well supported by the teams there. And that was referenced on a national call by the GSEC of the NHS, and that's very positive. And we also had a very good article published in The Guardian. And our expectation is that should the teams wish to do more media, and it is very much dependent upon whether it's helpful or not for the clinical teams. We will do that because the requests are certainly out there. And then LinkedIn, the final thing to say is that Kate and the team with Danielle have launched the 12 weeks of wellbeing post-Christmas. So we are every week doing a particular theme to support the team here at Milton Keynes. And those 12 weeks will play out over the next 12 weeks, surprisingly. So I'm sure Kate can update you on further on that, but it's things like free coffees, connecting staff and so on. So I'll pause there, and we've got the execs on who can answer the questions, hopefully.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ian. Questions? Hader.
Ian, Joe, it's great to, it's great to hear what we're doing to support staff. And my heart really goes out to all of them at this point in time. It's been an incredible 12 months. Especially concerned as to the palliative care burden that Ian was talking about. Is there anything specifically that we're doing around that? And I'm thinking of the experience that experienced palliative care nurses have that perhaps could be called on at this time.
So I think, and it's not just palliative care, it's also we need to think about other areas. So for example, the mortuary is clearly busier than it would be in a normal year. So we all heard yesterday about 85,000 excess deaths as an estimate for 2020 across England and Wales. The mortuary is busy too. It's a small team. In terms of support, clearly we have our palliative care support team, which is nurse-led and is absolutely great in normal times and at the moment. But again, they're a relatively small team. We're already pretty well integrated with Will and our local hospice in terms of medical staff and relationships between nursing staff. So I think we're doing all we can. I think the key thing for me, to be honest, is for seniors, now whether that's executives or whether that's matrons and senior nurses, to be visible and involved, and we are. And I think specifically in relation to the matrons are out and about on the wards all the time, supporting the more junior staff. So my hope, and so far I think the case is that whilst staff are having a very difficult time, I think there would be very few staff who'd feel very isolated. I think staff feel supported in this together, if that makes sense.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
It might just be worth bringing Kate in on some of the work that's going on.
Sure. So I think we've the 12 weeks of wellbeing encompasses an awful lot of different things, from psychological support for staff, so particularly those staff who are have perhaps been redeployed, who have finding the experience particularly challenging, and critical care teams are very good at debriefing, supporting each other. They're used to working in those environments, and we've got staff that are working in those environments that aren't used to working in them, so we need to support them appropriately. We are doing Time to Talk Day as part of the 12 weeks of wellbeing, which is a national mental health awareness initiative. So we'll be basing that around talking about needing support at work and a sort of emotion at work as well, and to be able to have those conversations in work. And as Joe said, it also encompasses things like, free coffees and free meals and things to encourage staff to take a break. So I think it's important we keep that focus on. Obviously, the things that we try won't be for, not everything will be for everybody. We've started with a platform called Click and Connect, which is for people, well, it's for anybody really, but it's primarily for people working at home really, who are feeling perhaps a bit isolated and a bit disconnected from the wider team and might be struggling for other reasons, particularly if they're doing homeschooling and things at the same time. So we're doing that next. We're starting a session, virtual wellbeing check-in session as well. First of those are next week, and we've opened those up through the flexible working platforms to staff outside Milton Keynes Hospital too, to talk about various different wellbeing issues. First one's sleep, so because people don't seem to be getting very much of it. So we'll keep that focus up. I think it's really important, and I think the conversation actually more than anything else is important, because people need to talk and need to express themselves, and we need to work out different ways to support them. And I think my main concern is that we don't forget about that as the pandemic passes. hopefully, and that we move on to the next thing. We don't forget that staff might still be feeling that trauma and that stress and that distress for quite a long time afterwards.
I think that's a very valid point, Kate, and I think this is the after effects of this are going to last for some time, and that definitely should not be forgotten. So a number of hands. I'm going to go Nikki, and then Helen, and then John.
Thanks. Just a kind of quick question. Thanks, Kate. I mean, I think the well-being of staff is just huge, and there's been a lot of media coverage, and we're starting to see the impact on the mental health of staff. And I just wondered, are we doing anything extra special with like CNWL in order to support that kind of mental health well-being and what it is?
Kate, do you want to answer? Yes is the answer.
You're on mute.
Sorry. We're doing work in a variety of different ways with CNWL. So we've used them for, worked with them with particular psychological input and support for staff. So using their psychologists to come and support teams and individuals for debriefs, etc. Beds Luton and Milton Keynes through CNWL have launched a platform for staff. I forget what it's called now, but it's specific. They launched it just in the last week. That's a kind of telephone access service where staff can phone up and just get immediate access. We also provide that through our own platform too. So there's lots of access available for staff. What we're going to do is produce, as part of before Time to Talk Day, which is at the start of February, is produce a booklet for all members of staff with all of those resources together in them, because I think there's a huge amount of actual resource there, and there's lots of things that staff can use, but they might not know about them. So I think delivering something to staff to say here it all is in one place, and we'll do it on the intranet too, but we know that doesn't necessarily reach everybody, would be it's a really important part of that, because there is a lot of stuff there that's really good, actually, really good support.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Helen.
I've got a couple of comments and a question. I just want to extend the thanks. What an incredible job. And also to pay some tribute to the comms and the media that's taken place, so especially Joe, in terms of the weekly bulletin and the external media. I think that it's really great that people are being kept up to date, not just staff but public as well. I've got a question in terms of the staffing, and have we got enough volunteers and I guess enough areas for volunteers to work on is the first question, and to note the internal flexibility of the staff and the training of the staff, so the moving and the flexibility. But I wondered if there was external flexibility as well. I do appreciate that everybody's under their own pressures, like primary care, mental health and so forth. But I wondered if there was any flexibility externally in terms of staffing as well.
So a couple of things. One is that we have now offered our volunteers, our external volunteers, vaccinations, simply in order to, we've had a number of people come forward and say they want to come back and help, and volunteers are listed as one of the key workers status that can come in, so we've done that. Secondly, we have asked internally for volunteers from our other professional staff, so not those clinical people obviously, and we've had a very good response that Kate is leading on to the circa 50 people that have volunteered to come forward and do a range of jobs. And we've also had now the medical students being asked to volunteer to come in as healthcare support workers or as necessary to support on the wards appropriately. So we're treading that fine balance between making sure that we use every person who wants to put themselves forward, and also making sure that we've got appropriate training and oversight of people coming in. And that individuals are doing the roles that are suitable for them. So I think the answer is we're doing better than I think we did in wave one. And I think irrespective of the numbers, the conversation we had this morning at Gold was that we would want to use volunteers simply to try and ensure that those teams that have been working full on, even if the numbers do decline, we give them some support over the next couple of months. And thank you for your comments on comms as well.
John, did you want to come in?
Yes, just very briefly. I mean, first of all, thanks again, everybody, for the Herculean effort that's ongoing. And I really, really hope that as the days get longer, you know, it lifts and everyone can get some rest, because it's been extraordinary. A quick question, if I may, for Ian. The treatment protocol for COVID has evolved nationally and internationally, and I think we now do much better than we did perhaps in the first wave. How do we ensure that we're always at the front of that we're early adopters of any improvements come through?
Thank you, John. So yeah, I think this is difficult. It's going to be quite a British answer. So I'm conscious that various places around the world, particularly in the States, started using everything relatively randomly at the beginning of COVID, whereas in Britain we've been pretty clear about starting trials, but getting trials up and running really quickly in an organised way, doing them at scale because the NHS is well equipped to do that, and then actually getting definitive evidence-based answers. So an example of that would be dexamethasone. Now, sitting here in January 2021, you know, yes, I feel somewhat sad that patients in February and March of 2020 didn't necessarily get dexamethasone because they were in a trial and they may have been given dexamethasone or placebo. We now know that dexamethasone is very helpful. On that specific example, from memory, the data was published on the 15th of June last year, and the NHS was then instructed the day after to make sure people were routinely getting dexamethasone. We made sure that people routinely got dexamethasone on the 15th of June, i.e. the day it was published and the day before there was a national instruction. And today in my diary, I have a very exciting meeting at 2 o'clock, which is to discuss the use of tocilizumab in ITU, which is a relatively rare and expensive medicine, but one again that has through trials been proven to be helpful in the ITU population. So we're now, on the basis of a publication earlier in the week, working out how we can be making use of that medicine. I expect the national instruction will come in the next few days, but we're making plans for that. If I then turn that on the head, there were lots of people at the beginning of this pandemic who were saying, hydroxychloroquine, let's use it, and not just American presidents. There were all sorts of people saying, let's use it. It's not evidence-based, doesn't work, wasn't the right thing to do in retrospect. So I'm proud that we're involved both locally and nationally in doing trials of a high quality and doing them quickly, if that sort of answers your question.
Thanks, Ian. It absolutely does, and I think I really hope some people in Rand Milton Keynes are watching this video and hear that answer, because there's a lot of misinformation out in the world, and one of those is we were slow with this, we were slow with that, and I think that's absolutely not the case. And the Resolver, was it the Resolver trial? Was that what it was called? Was a fantastic piece of work.
Recovery trial. Yeah.
Recovery. That's right.
Thank you. So can't see any more questions. Just one from me, and just a specific one. Clearly a lot of focus on adults at the moment. How are the paediatric services bearing up? Because if I've understood it correctly, there may be some nasty viruses coming to light in that, particularly in the southern hemisphere. Just wonder whether that might be translating through up here. Ian, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, so at the moment, our paediatric services have been relatively quiet for winter, which is a big relief all round. Now, the reasons for that will likely relate to reduced social interaction, reduced exposure to each other at school, etc., and therefore less transmission of respiratory infections. Now, the benefits of that are multiple, but firstly, it means that the normal winter peaks, we had one in October, but the sort of Christmas and January peaks haven't happened. But also, we're very conscious that children, particularly at this time of year, normally with their respiratory infections, are major users of oxygen. So both locally and indeed in the wider NHS, it is a relief that we don't have adult COVID and paediatric respiratory problems simultaneously. So at the moment, it's fine. We've not yet seen a significant pickup in respiratory infections, recognise that we need to be looking at patterns elsewhere. And probably important to note also, we've been able to move some of our paediatric emergency department across into Milton Mouse, which is the paediatric outpatient department 15 yards away, which has freed up some additional capacity in ED. So that's been really helpful in terms of the profile of disease in adults and children.
That's great. Thanks, Ian. Joe, do you want to come back for anything on your CEO report, or is it really we've really focused on everything?
I only want to say on behalf of the execs as well, a huge thank you to the organisation for everything that individuals, teams are doing to look after and serve the population of Milton Keynes. I think it is a fantastic effort. So no, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, let's move on to the nursing staffing report. Clearly, Nikki isn't with us. Unless anybody has any burning questions on this, the paper is in the packs, and I will just suggest that we note it. But if anybody does have anything they wish to raise or say, please do so.
So Simon, I'm prepared and happy to take any questions or comments. I guess from my perspective, having spoken to Nikki, it's part of the paper is rather historical, November data, which is a different context from where we are now. But I think it does outline very usefully how nursing staff who aren't normally in front, so it's a separate paper in the file. Nursing staff who aren't normally in inpatient ward-based roles are being deployed incrementally back to the wards, and how she's managing that.
Helen, you're on mute, Helen.
Having difficulty unmuting. In terms of the nurse round paper, it's laid out really well, understandable, so forth. But I just wondered, in terms of other disciplines, Ian, in specific the medics, the pressures that the medical team are actually under, and we concentrate a lot on nursing staff, and rightly so. But I just wondered, for your perspective, the difficulties, or are there difficulties in terms of the same way in terms of medical cover?
So there are challenges, and people are working hard. There's no doubt about that. I think the redeployment question. So in wave one, we were instructed and did close down quite a lot of elective services fairly abruptly and redeployed people. So far, our redeployment's been much more limited. And it's predominantly around some additional both consultant and junior support on the wards, but that's an additional shift a day rather than moving tens of consultants from their normal activity. So at the moment we've cut down, I'm estimating at this point, probably about 20% of our clinics, which are registrar or trainee-led clinics, have been reduced in order to free up those registrars to do certainly more night shifts, etc., to make sure we've got better coverage on the wards. And clearly, anaesthetics and ITU is an important interface, and we've got more intensivists and more anaesthetists working in intensive care and less in theatre. And we're doing very little surgery at the moment, only urgent and cancer.
Helen, can I just say you managed to share your screen? You need to unshare it.
Yeah. And that looks like it. Back to normal. Okay, any further questions on that? No, can't see any. So Ockenden, I don't know if anybody wants to report to that. There's clearly the letter that we sent back following the publication of the report and the recommendations in it. Ian, yeah.
I'm also expecting to talk briefly to the Ockenden report on Nikki's behalf. So this pack begins at page 14 of the pack. So the Ockenden report is a seminal report for the NHS, similar in some ways to the Robert Francis report from Mid-Staffordshire, although thankfully much shorter. The Ockenden report was initially started because of concerns raised by two sets of parents who should be congratulated for continuing to take their concerns higher and higher until action was taken. But two sets of parents identified problems at Shrewsbury and Telford Trust. That quite quickly led to the identification of 23 births where there were concerns around either neonatal or maternal harms. And Donna Ockenden, a senior and experienced midwife, was asked to undertake this review. What has happened essentially is that things have spiraled very quickly, and from the 23 cases initially identified, they've now got up to 1,862 cases over a period of about 20 years, where there are concerns about care and outcomes which appear to be grounded on first sight. So it's a very large investigation. It's going to take some years, I'm sure. And what Donna Ockenden has done very helpfully, I think, is to release an interim report based on the first 250 cases that she has reviewed. In terms of what that report then tells us, I think there are lots of familiar messages in here in terms of issues and challenges that maternity units up and down the country face and deal with. For me, probably the key themes here are firstly the importance of multi-professional working and multi-professional review of women and families. Secondly, and obviously it's very sad to have to say this, but the importance of kindness and civility in everyday work in the health setting. How we identify and respond to risks in a methodical and standardised way. How we learn when things go wrong, which is obviously a challenge in all large organisations, and then connected with the concept of organisational memory. So some of the figures expressed in this report about executive team turnover, for example, are astonishing. We're very lucky here in Milton Keynes to have a very stable executive team, but 8-9 years ago we were not that different in terms of the turnover of executive staff. And I think the one thing that really struck me from this report was the rate of caesarean sections at Shrewsbury and Telford. So the mantra in the NHS for years has been, generally speaking, caesarean sections are a bad thing, minimise them. And Shrewsbury and Telford appear to have taken this message at face value and have rather overdone it. And there was a year when they had 11% caesarean sections compared to a national average of 24-25%. So there's something about blindly and unthinkingly following an instruction and the results of that. There are 7 sort of thematic areas for actions that have come out of this report. We were sent it on the 10th of December, and it's slightly unusually the NHS wanted written responses back very, very quickly, and we've done that. We're now working on a more detailed action plan in terms of our local take on these key actions. There's a letter on page 62, which is the provisional holding letter, which I hope gives you an understanding of where we are on this whole area. I think we were originally expected to submit the formal action plan by the middle of January, tomorrow, and that has been delayed. I think it's now at the end of next month from memory because of COVID. For those colleagues who've been in the team, in the non-executive team for a while, you'll be conscious that we've done a lot of work around maternity over the last 5 years or so. There were 2 or 3 difficult coronial cases back in 2013-14, and we've done lots of work with our system, importantly with women, and also with the regulators on improving our maternity services. I'm not for a moment suggesting we haven't got further to go. All services need to improve, but our service, we have evidence and assurance around its performance in recent years, and we carry on trying to improve things. I'm very happy to take questions or comments.
I think, Ian, thanks very much for that. I think I will leave the questions now. We'll pick that up in the Quality Committee in due course. As you say, we have focused on this in relation to our own maternity services, and I think that's an appropriate place to do it, and we'll bring it back from the board in due course. So thank you for that. Performance report, which is there, which clearly is affected by the current circumstances. So I am also proposing that we note that, unless anybody has a blinding concern about what's coming out of it. But given the issues that we're facing at the moment, it is what it is in my view. Likewise, the finance report, unless there's a particular issue that you wish to highlight, Sophia, I'm going to take that as read as well. Danielle clearly is not here to deal with the workforce report. If there are any issues around that, if they can submit them through to me, I'll pick up with Danielle in due course. But clearly the biggest issue at the moment is making sure that our staff remain fit and safe. And that's emotionally and physically. So those are the big issues from my perspective. Winter escalation, COVID second wave, we've sort of dealt with that. I don't know if there's anything, Emma's not here, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Joe.
No, thank you. It's a work in progress, as you would expect.
Yeah. We have an estates update. John, is there anything particularly you want to add? But I suspect we've covered most of it in recent meetings.
I think we probably have. Just to note that we've knocked down the Maple unit and we're ready to open another car park. But other than that, I think nothing new to report.
Thank you. The significant risk register is there for noting. If anybody has any issues coming out of it, if they could send them through either to myself or to Kate, we will pick up on those outside the meeting. As I say, it is there for noting. Of far more significance and importance for discussion is the BAF, which I would like to spend some time focusing on now. So, Jo, Kate, if you want to lead on this initially.
Thank you. So the BAF looks slightly different this month. You'll see there's lots of pink boxes. Those are just to highlight risks that have either escalated significantly or new risks in the reporting period, sort of months since we last looked at it. You'll notice that they are almost exclusively related to managing the pandemic and the second wave. Some of these, the finance risks have been discussed at Finance Committee already earlier on this week, but some clear and sort of pressing risks just to really bring to the board's attention around oxygen use and how we are managing that. We've discussed a bit of that already, around the levels of staff sickness and isolating along with households and the impact that may have on service levels, and that is still being very closely managed on a day-to-day basis. Whether we have another surge of activity and the risk that contingency continuity plans will be overwhelmed, and obviously we are working very hard to make sure that that is not the case and to manage and mitigate that risk. We are continuing to manage the nosocomial infection. The board will recall that we have previously seen the infection prevention and control board assurance framework. That's a separate document that comes to the board. It will come. It will be circulated around to the quality committee and to the board again. It was updated and circulated last month and is available publicly, I think, too. The other risks on here are obviously disruption to elective services. Those risks are already on the BAF, but they are escalating risks as we stop services to manage emergency responses. So happy to take any questions, or for colleagues to take any questions around assurances. I'm expecting that I've carved out some of these risks because some of them I'll expect to come and go. I would hope they will come and go fairly quickly. So I don't want to sort of put them as resident on the BAF. They're also quite operational, so wouldn't really normally be on the board assurance framework, but I think they are important nevertheless for the board to be aware of. So they include risks that are resident on the BAF because they've been risks for the last few months, but other risks that have been de-escalated at different points or have come on as new. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kate. Questions?
Hi, Sam. I've raised my hand. I don't know if it's shown.
It is, yes,
Okay.
Indeed. Far away,
No,
Heidi.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Kate. And while some of them might be operational, I think that actually makes the BAF live in terms of reporting to the board and execs and non-execs. So I welcome the putting on and taking off of. Whilst I know there's some work has to go behind that, I think that's a positive step for us with our BAF. So thank you.
Agree entirely. Any other questions or comments from people? Helen.
Oh, successfully unmuted this time. I just wanted to pick up, Kate, but I think that was reassuring for me was actually, when you look at the risks relating to the report that we've just had, the Ogden report, actually you see how the risks have been picked up and the assurances and the mitigations are in place. And I was able to align that to the report. So it's, although we've got issues in maternity and art services, I think actually what this demonstrated to me was how you can align the gaps and assurances and the mitigations to that, to the report. So I found that really helpful.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from anyone on the BAF? It's a very helpful piece of work. Ian.
Yes, Simon, I think just words are important. I know what Helen meant, but I don't think we do have issues in our obstetric department. I think my view would be that whenever a report such as the Ockenden report or the Robert Francis report into Staffordshire's published, where essentially the difficulties and challenges, the dirty laundry, however one wants to look at it, of another organisation is shared. We have an absolute duty to look at that, talk about it, and make sure it's widely discussed. I'm not concerned or worried about our maternity service. I think we have an active improvement plan that we're many years into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, and I maybe didn't articulate it really well, but what I was trying to say is actually it was reassuring, actually, was picking up the risks and how we're mitigating them, and then aligning that to actually some of the mitigations that and some of the issues that were highlighted in that report. I found it really positive and reassuring.
Joe.
Thanks, Simon. Two things for me. One is just making sure that as a board, as we are as execs, asking ourselves the question the whole time: are there things that we are worried about that are not appearing on this risk register, or this BAF rather? And I think this is probably the most helpful BAF that we've had through for some time, given its real focus. I think it's a good job. I think the second thing is just there's a breaking story today that 1 in 10 nurses are now off sick, and it comes back to Ian's point around the nursing workforce piece. We have gone into that in a significant amount of detail, and we do so on a daily basis, both at Gold and indeed right down to operational ward and shift levels. So I just wanted to let the board know that we are all over that, given the level of sickness and any concerns there might be.
Thanks, Joe. Any other comments or questions from anyone? No. Clearly an evolving piece of work, something we're going to have to keep an eye on. But very good piece of work, Kate. Thanks to you and the team for bringing that forward. So we go on to the Finance and Investment Committee of the 2nd November, 30th of November, which do seem an awful long time ago now. So unless anybody has any specifics on those, I'm going to pass over them and note them, which I think, unless I've got things badly wrong, bring me to any other business from anybody. I have one, which I will deal with after I've given other people the opportunity. Joe.
Thank you, Simon. I would just like to formally record our thanks to you in the public part of the board for being our chair. I think from memory, you joined in 2015 as a non-exec, and then took over the reins on the unfortunate death of Margaret. And I am sure speak for the whole board when I say thank you very much indeed, both for your personal and your professional guidance over these past several years. You will be missed. I have no doubt that Alison will come in and pick up the reins very, very quickly and very well. But certainly from the exec team, I'm sure the non-exec team as well, a big thank you. There's a Prezi waiting for you when you get back. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that. That was actually my area about any other business. Circumstances have spared you from the very long speech that I was going to give on the occasion of my last public board meeting, so you're all very lucky. But I did want to say a very quick thank you to everybody at the hospital, for those members of the board now and in the past. I couldn't have done this job without the tremendous support that I've had, not only from colleagues on the board, but colleagues throughout the hospital. Clearly not the last 12 months I was envisaging, and nor I suspect anybody else, but it has only increased my admiration for the fantastic job that the hospital does for the community in Milton Keynes. It has some outstanding people, and I don't use those words lightly, exceptional people, and that dedication has merely been highlighted during the very, very troubling and unfortunate last 12 months. One thing I would recommend, I bought myself the book Dear NHS, which is a series of letters put together by Adam Kay, by various people saying thank you to the NHS for the marvellous work that it does. If you want to cheer yourself up, I'd thoroughly suggest you read it. There are some tremendous stories in there, and I think it highlights the great regard and great respect in which everyone in the NHS is held. So it's been a privilege and a pleasure to act as chair. I shall miss it tremendously, but I wish Alison and all of you the very, very best for the future. So thank you.